I'm Carla. I'm a food addict, compulsive eater, bulimic. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet. I write them down. I call them into my sponsor. I eat those meals and nothing else in between. And just for today, abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. My abstinence date is March 31st, 2007. Thank you so much for asking me to speak, Tara, on your anniversary. I'm sorry. Those two didn't have anything to do with each other. I'm really glad to be here. Although it's funny, I earlier today I was like, what am I gonna say? So which is so funny. I mean, my story doesn't change. I mean, different things, of course, come out this mouth that I speak from. I came from the morbidly obese side of our family. I was an overweight child from about 8 on. I used food for things other than fueling my body and, momentary pleasure, as people do. Early on, food was there. Food was a comfort. I saw other people getting pleasure in it, and I started sneaking food very early. My mom was a sneak eater. She hid things. But then she was kind of an ass about the fact that she had things hidden. She was snarky about that, and so it was kind of challenging to find those things. She didn't ever have a weight problem. That doesn't mean she couldn't have been messed up in the head, of course. Sorry, that just came to me. My dad was a compulsive eater, or seemed to be. He's deceased, and somehow that makes it okay for me to take people's inventory if they're not on earth anymore. I don't know that that's really a thing. And in looking back, what he did, these crazy diets, but like really what I would say shame-based kind of dieting, like with the buddies at work where they'd have a kitty, and they'd bet things, and they were just so cruel to each other about, you're gonna eat that, and just very unkind. And he had I just ran across this 8mm reel-to-reel tape of my dad walking up and down the street in our my childhood neighborhood, with a sign that said, "I, Lou Brannon, am fatter than my son-in-law," with a pig, drawn on it. And that was their thing: is whoever lost, as in didn't lose as much by Thanksgiving. This was my brother-in-law. He had, they had to walk up and down the street with this sign. And it was funny. I've told that story before. And so it was really kind of good to see the video of it, because there was part of me that was kind of going, oh, maybe I lost my mind. So, had some unusual behaviors in both of my parents, and addiction to alcohol on both sides of my family. And, my mom, they started putting me on diets when I was about 11. I remember that in 5th grade, we didn't have a cafeteria, so they would wheel this cart around to the classrooms. And in 5th grade, you got to volunteer on the lunch cart. And if you volunteered on the lunch cart, you got to have a free hot lunch, which I never got. And it was in 5th grade that my mom decided I was going to take a, bag with a ha-ha and the thing that we just have for breakfast as my, my lunch. And so that was disappointing to me. And, when I looked back at pictures of myself at that age, I don't look heavy, but it didn't take long until I was heavy. In the 70s, they didn't have, clothes for kids and women that were oversized. My mom made my clothes until she couldn't stretch out the patterns or to make them big enough. And so, we'd go to the store and look at those, polyester big print options. And it was really horrible. In fact, in high school, my best friend at the time asked if she could borrow this plaid skirt I had. It was this big plaid pleated skirt, wool. And she did, and I didn't ask why. And like a year or so later, her family had this board where they had tons of different pictures on it. And I saw a picture of her dad in my skirt dressed up as like an old lady for Halloween. And that was really difficult. So it was just humiliating. It was just so humiliating. People called me names, boys especially called me names, and it was bad. And I kind of realized that I could use my humor to kind of get myself into the in crowd or to be liked, and that that meant that I was I was the person who knew things. So I was a horrible gossip. I was the person that you wanted to come to if you wanted to know something, and that made me feel valuable. I also became I was the buddy. I was a good buddy in high school while my friends were, exploring sexuality and whatnot. That just wasn't, I just knew that wasn't going to be in my wheelhouse then, because I was fat, and that just wasn't part of it. And I really knew that, finding a man, and getting, married and having the kids was not in my cards because of my weight. And that was a horrible feeling. So I just kept gaining weight and kept gaining weight. After high school, my parents underwrote a number of the big box diets, Nutrisystems a couple times, Jenny Craig a couple times. I went to Weight Watchers off and on. But frankly, at that point, I think in part it was kind of like, well, it's going to cost more money to get me thin. I don't know. Somehow those two were equated. And I also, I would just eat all the good things. By the time I'd tried Weight Watchers, they had all the good things, the sweet things and whatnot. And so I would just eat all those. And it was so, I couldn't even, in the other programs, I could get, a good week in, or, on some of them, I lost the same 80 pounds a number of different times, but I kept it off for 35 seconds. And then I was just right back at it. So, my first introduction to 12 steps for food. I had kind of heard about OA, but I had I was a late bloomer in relationship world. Turns out I was attracted to women, and I moved in with my first partner, and when it was early in our relationship, I was, I felt confident. I was very in love with her, but I couldn't wait for her to leave. It just was like, she just was in the house, and I couldn't understand that. I would think, well, maybe I don't really love her. What is wrong with me? But really what it was, she was just in the way. She was between me and my food, and I just couldn't have that. And so, with her, it wasn't all that uncommon for, if she'd forgotten something or whatever, I'd already be having to throw bags and things around because I would already be all in my, in a binge, and she'd forgotten something and she'd come back in. And so that it was hard for me not to see. I had lived alone for quite a bit of time before that. Between those kinds of things and my stepdaughter, who, she would go to her dad's for several days. So I would eat all the things that she had in her refrigerator that were good, and then I'd replace all the things, and I would replace it multiple times. And so I was seeing some behaviors in myself that kind of scared me. I saw the progression that kind of freaked me out, and I just kept gaining and gaining. And then there was a period of time where I just kind of hung out around 250 pounds, and I'm 5'1", so that's a chunk of change. I did a few different diets with my partner, and then I went through a brief, stage where I was going to really try fat acceptance. And, and the internet was fairly recent, but I found I can't even remember the name now, but, that, yeah. And I remember that was when I was going on a flight, which anybody who's had, been of size, sucks so badly. And so I bought a second ticket. I bought the seat next to me, and I thought that was the answer. I was imagining that I would be so serene. Right. It didn't, I didn't think of this, but towards, as we were, as the plane was filling up, people, who's sitting there, what's that, what's this seat about? Da, 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 da. So I still had to answer these questions of this seat. It was anything but peaceful. So I was horrible to people. I mean, that this partner that I speak of said to me once, I would hate to be you. I would hate to be a clerk or a waitress when you're mad. And another time she used to, when I didn't honk my horn all that often, but when I honked my horn, it seemed silly to honk it unless you were going to do it for a really long time. It was just off the charts with my anger. And she had a loving intervention with me and talked to me about, I've seen you with the food. I don't think you can do this by yourself. I think you're an addict and I think you need help. And she had a professional relationship where she used, the 12-step programs with clients. And so I said, okay, I'll go to OA. So I did. And, I was able to let go of the idea that I was crazy. It was powerful, that first however long in Overeaters Anonymous. I really got that there were other people like me, that I wasn't, a savage, that I wasn't depraved, that I did get that I could have a power greater than myself, because I let go of that. I didn't think I was one of the chosen ones. I'd been in some pretty restrictive religions that seemed pretty clear, and I didn't fit that scenario. I had a sponsor, went through the steps, had some physical recovery, but I'd had a hard time after I asked about the food. What do I eat? How do I do this? And a few times, and got the, we just don't eat the white stuff, or, whatever, sensible meals. I did the 3 meals a day with nothing in between, but it changed. And I ended up starting to lie to my sponsor and gain the weight back. But I knew I couldn't go anywhere else. I knew I couldn't go back out to, any of the other diets. So I did some more research, and because, sensible always meant I was always still putting sugars of some variety in my body. And so, so the craving was still there. I had a really horrible year, and I got up to 325 pounds. So I found GreySheet, and, no one promised me a rose garden. But one day at a time, with my food down, I know I know what the next thing to do is in my life. No matter what, I may not always like it, but what seems true is, someone was talking today about, you have to have moderate discomfort. And, the things I want, I need to be able to withstand moderate discomfort in the short term. And it is really just serenity prayer. It's like knowing and doing the things I can control, and letting go, and not doing and letting go of the things I can't control. And I do this no matter what. And I do a lot of service, because I got to stay with you guys, because I will forget if I'm out there in the world. I will forget so fast. Thank you all so much, no matter what.